I never thought I'd have to face my parents in court. The same people who beat me unconscious when I was 16 while I was pregnant with their grandchild. Life has a strange way of coming full circle, though. 20 years later, they showed up at my doorstep, homeless and desperate, with nothing but shame in their eyes. And I took them in. Call it compassion or foolishness, I'm still not sure which. What they didn't know was that I'd become a different woman, not just successful, but powerful in ways they couldn't imagine. I built a life they tried to destroy. My daughter grew up without knowing her grandparents, and I raised her to be everything they weren't: kind, honest, strong. For 6 months, I housed them, fed them, listened to their excuses, all while gathering evidence. Because sometimes justice isn't about forgiveness, it's about consequences. And when they tried to take my home, claiming elder abuse of all things, they had no idea I'd been recording everything, every confession, every threat, every moment they thought no one was watching. This is how I finally made them pay for what they did to me. This is how I won. Growing up in Lexington, Kentucky meant keeping up appearances. My father, Richard, was a deacon at First Baptist, respected, feared, and completely different behind closed doors. My mother, Eleanor, was his perfect Southern wife in public, charity committees, church potlucks, PTA president. They were what people called pillars of the community. What nobody saw were the bruises hidden under my long sleeves, even in summer. Spare the rod, spoil the child wasn't just a saying in our house, it was gospel. Richard believed discipline came through pain. A C+ on a math test meant the belt. Coming home 10 minutes late meant being locked in the cellar. Mom would just turn up the TV volume to drown out my cries. When I was 14, I made the mistake of wearing makeup to school. Nothing dramatic. Just some mascara and lip gloss I'd borrowed from my friend Jessica. That night, Richard dragged me to the bathroom, scrubbed my face with steel wool until I bled, then paraded me in front of dinner guests with my raw, swollen face, announcing I'd tried to look like a whore. By 16, I was desperate for escape. That's when I met Tyler at a football game. He was 19, kind, with gentle hands that never struck me. 6 months later, I was pregnant. When I finally gathered the courage to tell my parents, we were sitting at Sunday dinner. "I'm going to have a baby," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The silence was deafening. Then my father stood up so quickly his chair crashed to the floor. "No daughter of mine is having a bastard child." What followed still haunts my nightmares. They took turns, Richard with his fists, Eleanor holding me down. I remember the sickening crack of my ribs, the metallic taste of blood, the moment I thought they would kill not just me, but my unborn child. I lost consciousness on the dining room floor, our good Sunday tablecloth soaking up my blood. I woke up in the hospital. Tyler's parents found me when he called, worried after I missed our date. The doctor said it was a miracle the baby survived. My parents told everyone I'd been in a car accident. The police came, but I was too terrified to tell the truth. What 16-year-old girl accuses her church deacon father and charity-working mother of attempted murder? I moved in with Tyler's family to finish my pregnancy. They weren't rich, but they were kind, the first real family I'd ever known. When Lily was born, healthy despite everything, I made a promise. My daughter would never know the pain I'd known. She would never fear her own home. For years, I thought I'd escaped them forever. I put myself through community college while raising Lily, then state university, eventually landing a job at a law firm as a paralegal. I learned how the system worked from the inside. Each promotion, each raise was another wall between my past and present. I moved us to Cincinnati, just far enough that we could build a new life, close enough that I could still watch them from a distance. What my parents never knew was that I kept a journal of everything they did to me, with dates, details, photographs of injuries when possible. I saved the hospital records, the police reports, not for revenge, at least that's what I told myself, but for protection. If they ever came looking for me or tried to contact Lily, I would be ready. For 18 years, there was silence. Then, last winter, my phone rang with a Kentucky area code I hadn't seen in decades. Eleanor has cancer, stage 4. We lost the house to medical bills. My father's voice on the phone was thinner, older, but still sent ice through my veins. "We've got nowhere to go, Melissa." I should have hung up, should have blocked the number. Instead, I found myself saying, I need to think about it. Not a yes, but not the definitive no I'd rehearsed for years. When I told Lily, now 19 and home from her sophomore year at Ohio State, she was confused. "These are the grandparents who almost killed you, and you're considering letting them stay with us?" "Sometimes people change," I said, not believing it myself. "Mom, you're a paralegal at a law firm that literally specializes in domestic abuse cases. What would you tell a client in your position?" She was right, of course, but there was something else, something I couldn't fully explain to my daughter. A need to face them as the woman I'd become, not the terrified girl I'd been. 3 days later, they arrived in a rusted-out Buick with 2 suitcases between them. My father, once broad-shouldered and imposing, was stooped and gray. Eleanor was gaunt, her cheeks hollowed by illness and what I hoped was remorse. They stood awkwardly on my porch, the beautiful craftsman home I'd purchased after my promotion to senior paralegal 3 years ago. "You have a lovely home," Eleanor whispered, eyes darting nervously toward the door where Lily stood, arms crossed, a perfect guardian. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. I worked hard for it, I replied, the subtext clear. I succeeded despite you. I showed them to the guest room. "Dinner's at 6. I have rules in this house. First, you will respect my daughter and me at all times. Second, this arrangement is temporary, 3 months max while you get back on your feet. Third, this is my home, my sanctuary. You are guests here." Richard's jaw tightened, that familiar flash of anger in his eyes, but Eleanor put a hand on his arm. "We understand. Thank you, Melissa." The first 2 weeks were a strange dance of politeness and underlying tension. They tiptoed around my house like visitors in a museum. Eleanor spent most days resting, the cancer treatments having drained her. Richard tried fixing things that weren't broken, a habit I quickly shut down. "The faucet is fine, Richard. Please don't touch anything without asking." "Just trying to earn my keep," he'd mutter, but I caught the resentment. The hatred of being dependent on his daughter, the one he'd tried to break. Lily kept her distance, watching them with the clear-eyed judgment of youth. She'd never called them Grandpa or Grandma, only Richard and Eleanor, which irritated my father to no end. "She could show a little respect for her elders," he said one evening after Lily had gone to study at a friend's house. "Respect is earned," I replied calmly, washing dishes. "You haven't earned anything from her." That's when it started. The subtle shift, the testing of boundaries. Richard leaving his Bible open to passages about honoring parents. Eleanor making comments about how some girls are just naturally disrespectful. Small things, building gradually. Then came my birthday in April. Lily had planned a surprise dinner with friends from work and her boyfriend. When we returned from a spa day, I found Richard and Eleanor had invited their old pastor, Pastor Mitchell from First Baptist, and 2 church friends who happened to be passing through Cincinnati. "Surprise," Eleanor said weakly, as if this was a gift and not an invasion. The dinner was excruciating. Pastor Mitchell kept making references to the prodigal daughter, while Richard's friends asked probing questions about my life, my job, why I'd abandoned my parents for so many years. Lily grew increasingly tense beside me, her knuckles white around her fork. "Mom didn't abandon anyone," she finally snapped. "She escaped. There's a difference." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. "Young lady," Pastor Mitchell began, "the Bible teaches us." "The Bible also teaches thou shalt not kill," Lily interrupted, "but that didn't stop them from nearly beating my mother and me to death before I was even born." Richard stood up so quickly his chair toppled backward. For a moment, I was 16 again, terrified. But this wasn't their house, it was mine. "Sit down, Richard," I said firmly, "or leave. Your choice." The look he gave me should have turned me to stone. Instead, I stared back, unwavering. He slowly righted his chair and sat. After our unwelcome guests left, Richard confronted me in the kitchen. "You've raised an insolent, disrespectful child." "I've raised a strong woman who knows her worth," I corrected him, "something you tried to prevent." "We gave you everything," he hissed. "A good Christian home, discipline, values." "You gave me nightmares and broken bones," I cut him off. "And now I'm giving you shelter when no one else would. Remember that." The next morning, I found them huddled at the kitchen table with papers spread out, whispering intently. They quickly gathered everything when I entered. "Just looking at some medical bills," Eleanor explained, too quickly. That afternoon, I left work early and installed small cameras in the common areas of my home, legal in Ohio as long as they weren't in private spaces like bedrooms or bathrooms. I told myself it was just precaution, but deep down, I knew. They hadn't changed. They were planning something. I didn't have to wait long to find out what. 2 months into their stay, I received a certified letter at work. My hands trembled as I read it, a notice of a hearing for an emergency guardianship petition. Richard and Eleanor were claiming I was mentally unstable, that I'd been abusing them, that they needed protection from their disturbed daughter. They were trying to take my house. The evidence? Doctored photographs of bruises Eleanor had from her cancer treatments, statements from Pastor Mitchell and their friends about my troubled past and unstable behavior at the birthday dinner. They even had a psychiatrist, an old family friend, willing to testify that I showed signs of paranoid delusions based on a single meeting after church. Their strategy was clear: paint me as the abuser, gain control of my assets as my guardians, and take everything I'd built. The same playbook they'd used when I was a child appears saintly to the outside world while destroying me behind closed doors. That night, I calmly made dinner as usual: pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, a proper Midwestern meal. As we ate, Richard asked if I'd gotten any interesting mail today. "Actually, yes," I replied, serving Eleanor more potatoes. "A fascinating letter about guardianship." The fork paused halfway to Eleanor's mouth. Richard's eyes narrowed. "I'm wondering," I continued, "did you plan this before you called me, or did you come up with it after seeing my home?" "We don't know what you're talking about," Eleanor whispered. "The hearing is Tuesday at 10 a.m., I said. "I'll be there, with my evidence." "What evidence?" Richard scoffed. I smiled. "I've worked in family law for 15 years. Did you really think I wouldn't protect myself?" The weekend passed in icy silence. They avoided me, whispering on phone calls that abruptly ended when I entered the room. I downloaded the footage from my cameras. Richard searching through my financial documents, Eleanor taking photos of herself pretending to cry, their hushed conversations about getting what's rightfully ours. Tuesday morning arrived clear and bright. The Hamilton County Courthouse gleamed in the spring sunshine as we separately made our way inside. I wore a simple navy suit, professional, composed. Richard and Eleanor had dressed in their Sunday best, Eleanor in a wheelchair, though she had been walking fine the day before. Their attorney approached me in the hallway, a slick man in an expensive suit. "Miss Calloway, this doesn't need to get ugly. Your parents are willing to be generous if you cooperate. They only want what's best for you." "What's best for me?" I repeated. "They'll find out what that is soon enough." The courtroom was mostly empty. A few lawyers waiting for other cases, a board clerk, the judge reviewing documents. When our case was called, Richard and Eleanor's attorney painted a heart-wrenching picture. Elderly parents, one battling cancer, taken in by their estranged daughter only to be subjected to verbal abuse, neglect, and psychological torture. "Your Honor," he concluded, "these good people only want to protect themselves and, ultimately, their disturbed daughter from herself." When my turn came, I approached the podium calmly. "Your Honor, I'm a senior paralegal at Brennan, Martinez & Wu, specializing in domestic abuse cases. I've worked there for 12 years. Before the court grants any emergency petition, I'd like to present evidence that demonstrates the true nature of my relationship with the petitioners." I submitted the footage from my home cameras. The judge's expression darkened as she watched Richard and Eleanor plotting, practicing their stories, laughing about how they would finally get what that ungrateful bitch owes us. Then I submitted the medical records, my hospital admission at 16, photographs of my injuries, police reports. "These are the people seeking guardianship over me," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "The same people who beat me unconscious when I was 16 and pregnant with their grandchild. The same people who tried to kill my unborn daughter because she was, in their words, a bastard child." Eleanor began to sob dramatically, Richard's face contorted with rage. "Your Honor," I continued, "I took these people into my home out of compassion, despite their history of violence against me. They repaid that compassion by attempting to declare me incompetent and seize my assets. I'm not asking for anything except dismissal of their petition and a restraining order to protect myself and my daughter." The judge removed her glasses, fixing Richard and Eleanor with a stare that could have frozen hell itself. "Petition denied," she said flatly, "and I'm referring this case to the prosecutor's office for potential charges of attempted fraud, filing false reports, and perjury." As security escorted them out, Richard turned to me one last time. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "God sees what you've done." I leaned in close, so only he could hear me. "God saw what you did to me, too. Funny how he's on my side now." I walked out of that courtroom alone, into the sunshine, finally free. The aftermath of the hearing unfolded in ways I couldn't have predicted. My phone began ringing that same evening, old neighbors from Lexington, church members, even my third-grade teacher. The carefully constructed facade my parents had maintained for decades was crumbling. "We had no idea," Mrs. Abernathy, our next-door neighbor for 15 years, told me through tears. "There were rumors, but Richard was so respected, and Eleanor was always so involved in charity work. We should have seen the signs." The truth, once exposed, spread like wildfire through their community. 3 more young women came forward with stories about Richard's counseling sessions at church, inappropriate touching disguised as prayer, threats to keep them silent. The church board launched an investigation. Pastor Mitchell resigned suddenly, citing health concerns. Meanwhile, I hired a locksmith to change my locks and a security company to upgrade my system. The restraining order gave me legal protection, but paper doesn't stop bullets. For weeks, I jumped at every sound in the night, checked and rechecked the windows before bed. Lily was furious. "They should be in jail," she insisted, "not just humiliated, locked up." The prosecutor agreed. Based on the evidence I provided and new testimonies, they pursued charges against Richard for attempted fraud and elder abuse. ironically, for exploiting Eleanor's cancer for financial gain. The evidence suggested he had pressured her to exaggerate her symptoms and use her illness to manipulate me. What none of us expected was Eleanor's phone call 6 weeks after the hearing. "I want to talk," she said, her voice small and unfamiliar. "Without Richard." We met at a public library halfway between Cincinnati and Lexington. I brought my colleague Maria, an attorney from my firm, as a witness and protection. Eleanor came alone, looking even more diminished than before. The cancer, it seemed, was very real. "Richard's been arrested," she began. "The church has turned against us. Our friends won't return calls. The house is gone. I'm staying with my sister in Louisville." I waited, expecting excuses or blame, but instead she placed a worn leather journal on the table between us. "I kept track too," she said. "Every time he hurt you, every time he hurt me. I was too afraid to stop him, too weak to leave. That's not an excuse, just the miserable truth." The journal documented 37 years of abuse, not just against me, but against Eleanor herself, and later, other young women from the church. She had been both victim and enabler, trapped in a cycle she couldn't or wouldn't break. "Why show me this now?" I asked. "Because I'm dying," she replied simply. "Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 3 months, maybe less. I don't expect forgiveness, Melissa. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know I'm testifying against Richard, for whatever that's worth now." I felt nothing as I flipped through the pages. No satisfaction, no vindication, certainly no forgiveness. Just a hollow ache for the mother she could have been, the childhood I should have had. "Did you ever love me?" I asked suddenly, the question I'd carried for 20 years. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, but I feared him more than I loved you. That's my greatest shame." We didn't hug when we parted. I didn't promise to visit before the end. Some bridges, once burned, leave only smoke and ash. Richard's trial came 2 months later. I testified calmly, factually, without the emotion that had defined our relationship for so long. Eleanor testified from her hospital bed via video, her testimony devastating in its detailed account of decades of manipulation and violence. He was sentenced to 8 years for fraud, with additional charges pending from the church victims. Not nearly enough for the damage he'd caused, but something. Justice isn't always perfect or complete. Eleanor died before Richard's sentencing. I didn't attend her funeral. Instead, Lily and I planted a magnolia tree in our backyard, not in Eleanor's memory, but as a symbol of what had survived and grown despite everything. The most unexpected consequence came from Morgan, a young paralegal who joined our firm that summer. She had read about my case in the local paper and sought me out specifically. "My stepfather is hurting my mom," she confided one evening as we worked late. "She won't leave, says it's her Christian duty to stay. When I read about you standing up to your parents, about your mother's journal, I thought maybe you could help me help her." And so, almost without intending to, I became an advocate, first for Morgan's mother, then for others. My firm created a special project focused on domestic violence within religious communities, where victims often face unique barriers to seeking help. We called it the Magnolia Project. Tyler reached out after seeing a feature about our work on the local news. We hadn't spoken in years, not since Lily was 10 and he moved to Arizona with his new family. He was proud of what I'd accomplished, he said, proud of the woman Lily had become. "You did that," he told me. "You broke the cycle. Not everyone can." Life settled into a new normal. My home, once violated by their presence, gradually became mine again. I repainted the guest room, donated the bed they'd slept in, sage-smoked the corners like my friend Shanice had taught me. not because I believe in spirits, but because rituals of cleansing have their own power. Lily graduated from Ohio State with honors, then surprised me by applying to law school. "I want to do what you do," she explained. "Help people find justice, even when it's decades late." On quiet evenings, I sometimes sit in my garden beneath the growing magnolia and think about legacy. Richard and Eleanor's legacy was fear and pain, but it stopped with me. It didn't reach Lily. It won't touch the lives she'll change as an attorney. It won't shadow the people helped by the Magnolia Project. Sometimes breaking a family is the only way to heal. Sometimes the family you build from the ashes is stronger than the one that tried to burn you. Sometimes justice comes in unexpected forms, not just courtroom victories, but in the quiet triumph of living well, of replacing harm with healing. And sometimes the child they tried to destroy grows up to help others survive their storms too. Richard died in prison last spring. I felt nothing, not relief, not closure, not forgiveness. Just the quiet certainty that some chapters truly end. My story isn't unique. Behind the perfect family photos, behind the respected community leaders, behind closed doors, thousands of children endure what I endured. They're told it's discipline, it's love, it's God's will. They're told to honor their parents, no matter the cost. If you're living that nightmare now, hear me. Document everything. Tell someone you trust. Know that the fear and shame they've planted in you, that's their weakness, not yours. Your life belongs to you, not to them. If you've survived and made it to the other side like me, you already know. Healing isn't a straight line. Some days, the scars are just scars. Other days, they burn like they're fresh. Both are part of surviving. The Magnolia Project has now helped over 200 families escape abuse disguised as religious duty. Lily graduates law school next month. The tree in our backyard blooms every spring, stronger each year. This isn't a story about forgiveness. It's about justice, about reclaiming what was taken, about building something beautiful from broken pieces. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to this channel for more survivor stories. Not because our pain makes good content, but because telling the truth breaks the silence that protects abusers. Every view, every share weakens their power. Remember, family is supposed to be love, not fear. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away and never look back.